My name is Katherine Murphy, and I am the Playography Editor at Irish Theatre Institute. And I have the distinct pleasure this morning, I should say, to introduce Mark Ravenhill, one of the UK's leading contemporary playwrights and someone who likely needs little to no introduction in this room, quite honestly. Mark exploded onto the scene in 1996 with the now seminal Shopping and Fucking. Over the last 25 years, his work has included The Cane, Mother Claps Molly House, Citizenship, The Cut, Shoot Get Treasure Repeat, and a personal favourite of mine, Pool No Water. These works have been staged in the National, the Donmar Warehouse, and the Royal Court, to name but a few. His more recent work includes the musical The Boy in the Dress with the RSC and lockdown audio drama Angela. He is the incoming co-artistic director of the King's Head Theatre with Hannah Price. I can say from personal experience that as a student in university at the end of the noughties, you were hard pushed to have a season without at least one Ravenhill play, one Kane play, and one Churchill play. So safe to say that he holds very good company. In early 2021, he caused something close to a seismic event in the theatre community when he rejoined Twitter and began tweeting about the art, the act, and most importantly, the grit of playwriting. Since then, his 101 notes on playwriting have been shared thousands of times, with more than one Twitter user commenting that he has been delivering a master's worth of guidance and advice over the social media platform. Today, we welcome him in opening our What is a Play Symposium, inspired by Veronica Coburn's beautifully distilled quote, "A playwright is simply a maker or builder of plays." This is a sentiment she credits Gavin Costick having enlightened her with, and one that is echoed throughout the other essays in the companion publication. I'm going to ask Mark to join us on the screen now. We can't wait to hear your thoughts about building plays and making worlds. So please take it away.
Very much, and thank you to the Irish Theatre Institute and to Playography. It genuinely is a real honour to be here. So I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes and then there's time for some questions. So I'm going to start with my tweeting, which you've already referred to, Katherine. So this is my keynote address. A few months ago, I rejoined Twitter. I'd left nearly a decade before, finding it an embittered and hostile space. But with my new appointment as co-artistic director of the King's Head Theatre, I was aware that I needed to build an online community to engage with and to support our work. Searching for a way to start a productive dialogue, I tweeted a few notes about playwriting. The response was immediate and enthusiastic, and I started very quickly to attract hundreds of new followers every day. Realizing that this was what the Twitter sphere wanted from me, I committed to tweeting 101 notes on playwriting, which were eagerly commented upon, liked, and shared. I was aware from the start that this was an overcrowded marketplace, and one of which I had my suspicions. From almost nothing 20 years ago, there's now a snowstorm of books, courses, podcasts, and websites. 10 things that every successful screenplay must have. The 100 beats needed for a great play. Aristotle's rules for an action movie franchise. Was I just thickening the blizzard? I've been writing and making living from plays for 25 years now. So inevitably, not only have I wrestled with the problems of each individual play as I write it, but also thought more widely about what is a play? What's unique to this art of shaping words on a page that will only prove their worth in the mouths of actors moving into space in live performance? Can anything be learned from the writing of one play be useful when writing another? I meet writers new to playwriting who tell me that it's hard now, but they're looking forward to that moment when they've mastered the craft and it becomes easier to write a play. With a mix of glee and empathy, I tell them that day will never arrive. The problems of playwriting, if anything, get denser and more challenging as you go on. Wrestling with the problem, walking into the challenge is not the obstacle. That is the act of writing a play. And if you ever do reach the point where you've mastered the craft, that's probably the moment when you'll stop playwriting. The great contemporary Norwegian playwright, Jon Fosse, has created a substantial body of work that has been produced all over the world, although rarely in English, and was awarded a state residence resembling a small palace for life in the center of Oslo. But he stopped writing plays. Why, he was asked. Because, he said, I've worked out how to do it. And my advice to myself and to you, if either or both of us gets to the point, which is, I would say, highly unlikely, that we've worked out how to do it, please don't write a book about how to do it. A playwright who has reached a point where they're no longer struggling with the problem has reached a point of stasis, and a point of stasis with an accompanying book and lecture course is not helpful for playwrights who are starting to write for the stage, which is not the site of stasis, but of questioning and transformation and liminality. And if you think you're getting close to working out how to do it, I would suggest that you re-problematize your playwriting. Is your notion of character or storytelling or language or space really the only one? Has the way you've been using them to date been as much of a barrier as it is a channel for exploring truth? What is there in your writing that's received, habitual, a bit hokey, smoke and mirrors? How can you work to strip that away and make the truest play that you can? True, of course, in one of many ways, artistic truth not being the same as documentary truth, and the word true also having that sense that a carpenter might use it, that the work sits true. Perhaps the playwright who we can see most clearly following this path of getting close to working out how to do it and then re-problematizing their playwriting is another Norwegian, Henrik Ibsen. Ibsen worked, before he was a playwright, as a stage manager, although the role was closer to what we might now think of as a director. He was mostly staging plays that had already been successful in Paris. By the second half of the 19th century, Paris was the center of theatre production, parallel to the way that Hollywood now dominates filmmaking. The French theatre was confident that it had worked out how to do it. With the project of the bourgeois revolution seemingly complete, the Parisian playwrights created and worked within the model of la pièce bien faite, the well-made play, with its template of setup, climax, reversal, and so on, much of it given gravitas by referring back to Aristotle's Poetics, and many of whose rules can still be seen today in the construction of Hollywood screenplays. This well-made play model was in Ibsen's blood when he turned from writing historical epic to contemporary domestic. But as Ibsen progresses from play to play, he stretches and tests what's possible within this form. By the time he gets to A Doll's House, he's boiled it down to its essence and is using that essence to create the most provocative play of its moment. The plot mechanism, secrets and reveals, mounting tension and final confrontation of the well-made play are all there, but Ibsen is ruthlessly using them to expose a painful, urgent question of his time. And with A Doll's House spreading across Europe and then the rest of the world in readings and one-off performances, and finally full productions, Ibsen pressed on with his writing, each new play challenging the assertions of the previous one, re-problematizing what a character was. Hedda Gabler exists in a completely different psychological and aesthetic space from Nora in A Doll's House. And from Master Builder and on to John Gabriel Borkman, he is stripping away the mechanism of plot and rising tension altogether. This project of stripping away was progressed further by Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter, and Carol Churchill, who each seemed to reach a moment when the play of 2 hours became too cumbersome, and each of them started to pare a play back to its essence until many of their later works are only minutes long. So with my playwriting tweets, I was wary of creating a new set of rules for a new type of well-made play. I called them notes on playwriting to emphasize that these were simply my thoughts and observations as I went about writing for the theatre. A collection of marginalia, each of which should or could have beside it an unspoken question mark. Most people tweeting about them referred to them as tips, which is already a little more prescriptive than I'd intended. I've taken now to describing them as provocations, but this isn't quite right either, making them sound more disruptive or dangerous than they really are. So I guess my tweets are a distillation of the things I've learned while writing plays. But like all things learned, it's the journey, the process of learning, not from a teacher, but through your own work, that is of equal, if not greater value than anything one can articulate as a lesson learned. The knowledge that I have about playwriting is provisional. It needs testing and challenging every time I write a play. I'm wary of passing this knowledge on to anyone who doesn't see it as provisional, who won't put it through their own process of testing and challenging when they write. There is quite a substantial part of me that says, say nothing, keep your mouth shut, don't offer any commentary on the art of playwriting. The only really valuable knowledge that a playwright might gain, they'll gain by writing their play. To say anything is to give false hope of a shortcut to that knowledge, to join the hucksters and salespeople of the how-to school. But I want to encourage playwriting. Particularly, I want to be part of that project we're all engaged in, to move beyond the place where the great white men are almost the only playwrights, those who've been empowered to believe they have something to say and that they will be listened to and have the space, leisure and money and to have the time to write. Such a tiny fragment of the community have in the past written plays, and how much richer the theatre will be and our society if we can open the door to the study and the theatre. So this is why, however warily, I've shared my playwriting notes, hoping they'll nudge others from that wider community to write, without dictating that the plays they write look like my plays or the plays that have gone before. The distillation of a tweet, though, doesn't help facilitate a sense of knowledge being provisional. The limited word count tends to make everything look like a bullet point or an instruction. I was quite a way into my 101 tweets when I realized that I was using the word character. A character in a play is this, when writing a character, and so on. Character is a limiting word. Can the very different things that an actor embodies when they play Sophocles or Wilde, Beckett or Friel, Tennessee Williams or Carol Churchill really all be expressed by that word, character? That would seem to imply that there's one approach to writing them, one rehearsal process and one acting technique for bringing them to the stage, one way for the audience to receive them. Each era and each writer has a distinct notion of putting the human being on the stage. The character is, I would suggest, a mostly 19th century notion and comes with its own particular baggage and set of expectations about the importance of a personal story and backstory history, a social position and material possessions, alongside a notion formed within the English public school system that character that was something that was tested when a chap had his back up against the wall. Previous ages simply had terms like parts of the play, figures of the play, and persons of the play, and so on, each terms with their own unspoken assumptions. We still often use this word character, even though it's now, I would say, a hollowed out zombie word. So I went back through my tweets and I replaced character with people on the stage, which is not ideal or elegant, but at least is more open than character. When I tweeted that I was giving this keynote and that I was addressing the forbidding question, what is a play? The majority of people who commented suggested helpfully that it was all about story. And story has become the great agreed point about dramatic writing, at least in the Anglo-Saxon world. It's all about story, we say, and point back to Aristotle, who did indeed say that you should be able to tell a listener the story of a play and that it will have as powerful effect upon them as actually seeing the play itself. Which seems to make redundant the whole business of putting on the play. Why bother if it's all about a story that you can, Hollywood style, boil down to an elevator pitch? Why not just tell the story quickly? Then we can all have the rest of the evening off. So a play isn't all about story. That's why we sit for hours in the theatre rather than reading the plot summary on Wikipedia. A play is about how stories flow through people, how each of their stories contradicts or corresponds with the other people on stage, how for a moment they all come together in a shared story before fragmenting again to their own stories, how the story they've all been telling themselves crumbles, falls away until they're left with no story or begin to build another one. It's about people waiting for a story that maybe never happens. Or maybe that is actually a way of me saying that it is all about story, but story that is subjective or disrupted, questioned, delayed, pulled apart, and rebuilt. Story moves at very different paces in the plays that Aristotle writes about in the Poetics. Only he doesn't quite seem to notice. His notion of plot summary overlooks the ebb and flow of action, reaction, and reflection between the chorus and the actors, which make up almost half the running time of many of the plays from classical Greece that we still have. Here, in his text, The Poetics, which is still often seen as the cornerstone of Western dramaturgy, Aristotle proves himself unable to actually see the full shape of the plays that he's watching, and leaves us with a distorted inheritance of what story means for a play. So, in conclusion, yes, let's keep asking, what is a play? But let's all promise ourselves that we'll never come up with a definitive answer. And if any of you do, keep it to yourself. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that wonderful keynote and a really great start to the symposium. And that idea of coming towards a conclusive answer and the conclusive answer never being there is echoed through each one of the commissioned essays, and is certainly something that I think every writer, a writer of any form, seems to grapple with. I'm really, really interested in that element of story that you bring into it, and that a play isn't about story, and that I go back to one of your playwriting notes where you talk about that a play can be, I think it's language talking to itself. And could you speak a bit about, in terms of your own playwriting career and what you've had, what you've written, and what's been staged, how that's manifested?
Well, yeah, I think maybe more than story, which I sort of suggest that maybe is sort of central, but in a different way than maybe it's just, suggests it's all about the story. Maybe even more central than story is language talking to itself. So there's a sort of dialogic function, I think, to drama, that something, one thought comes, another thought contradicts itself. And that, if anything, trying to write my 101 notes, again, you are trying to get down to like, what are the essentials of a play? that's not going to tell people to write plays like the ones that exist already, but maybe gives them some clue as to what's at the heart of playwriting. And yeah, you can certainly take away characters and essentially story and something still be very dramatic through that basic contradictions and ebb and flow of language. So I suppose I'm thinking of something like Not I, or something like Sarah Kane's 448 Psychosis. And something I was doing a little bit in Pool No Water, my play, although that's a little bit more of a story-driven thing. So I think it's that contradictory dialectical process and progress that, if anything, is at the heart of a play. If anything, and maybe even that one's just maybe for any, if you try and boil it down to anything, anybody can always produce a great play that says, but this doesn't do that, or that applies equally to the novel or film or something. But I think the presence of those voices, and even the singular voice in contradiction with itself and in dialogue with itself, experience live, is, if anything, that's what's unique about a play.
Yeah,
the theatre.
And I think I'd be remiss having, you just brought up Beckett there, not asking about the impact of Irish writing on your work, because it's really evident when you read the playwriting notes as a whole, your references to Shaw, to Beckett, multiple kind of allusions to both, but then just direct call outs as well. So could you speak a little to that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't really have for quite a number of centuries really an English playwriting tradition. It's an Anglo-Irish playwriting tradition. So once you get past the Jacobean period, and sort of once we've invaded Ireland, really, we stop being able to write plays for ourselves. So it's the Anglo-Irish all the way through from the Restoration period through to Shaw, who are sometimes the only playwrights in the UK, or the only dominant playwrights. So it's not possible, I think, to for many centuries for us to claim our own tradition of playwriting. It's an Anglo-Irish tradition. So yeah, I think that's completely central to It's an Anglo-Irish playwriting tradition, rather than English playwriting tradition.
Absolutely, and it's lovely to hear that kind of said out loud and stated in such a clear and honest way. And something else that I can see there's questions starting to come in here now, but I might just make one other kind of statement before we kind of start with that, which is that I find. And I'm sure a lot of the writers who are on this call today, of whom there are many, will find great comfort in the fact that you express so clearly that you're still figuring it out as well, and that you're still grappling with this on a day-to-day basis, and that you kind of look inwards and kind of say, should I say nothing? And then kind of go, no, but that's not useful either. And the opening up of the conversation, I feel like I referred to in the introduction there as being a seismic shift. And it did feel seismic, I think, because that opening up just allowed for this kind of avalanche of people talking about playwriting in a way that I personally have never seen online before. And how do you feel about that, having had that impact and started that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't anticipate that at all. And as I sort of say in the keynote, you have mixed feelings about that, because I don't want to stray into the territory of adding another book to a shelf that is a how to write a play book. So I was always all the time trying to think a bit before I tweeted about how to offer something that was concrete, that somebody might take as a nudge without being prescriptive. So and I don't know, it's a balance you can never get right. Some of them I look back and I think are too prescriptive, and maybe some are so abstract they seem like some sort of mystic pronouncement. But obviously there's a real hunger there, and again I just question myself, is that hunger for shortcuts and easy solutions. And I think it's interesting what you say. I think the fact that, I'm sure not just me, but any playwright some way into their work would say they're still wrestling with some of the same questions that they started with, just in terms of craft, apart from anything else. It's interesting, some people just starting, I think, would find that a comfort, as you said, but some people look very deflated when you tell them that, and they've assumed that there's a few years at the beginning where you figure it out, and then this marvelous ride for coasting for another period where you've worked out how to do it. And yeah, I doubt whether there's many playwrights who feel like they ever reach that place. So you're either excited by the fact you're never going to reach that place, and that's just built in, or you're not. Maybe playwriting, maybe that's not the thing for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to start just going to some of the Q&As that are coming in here. So we have a question in actually from one of the writers who we commissioned for this for the companion digital publication, Philly McMahon. And hi. Philly says, who has just closed actually his fabulous show Once Before I Go in the Gate Theatre on Saturday evening. And Philly asks, Mark, thank you for the great words. What has the gift of queerness offered you as a playwright, or how has it shaped your writing?
Gosh, yes, I do wonder.
It's a big question.
Yes, I know. I do wonder about that. I mean, it's so indivisible from who I am. I mean, I may have started making up plays when I was like 4 years old, before I'd been to the theatre, and putting on costumes and making scenery and inviting the neighbours round. So I don't know whether a straight child would have done that. Maybe it's possible. I think for me personally, I think everybody's experience is going to be different. Maybe one of the things is that I enjoy many forms. I've written pantomime. I enjoy pantomime. I noticed in the slides that the notes about the Irish language pantomimes are in the database, because pantomime is so central to that tradition, which I didn't know, and which fascinated me. The only pantomimes I've seen in Dublin, the really bad guys all had English accents, so that, which also interested me. Pantomime, cabaret, opera. I've written for all of them, and so I think if anything, maybe that's me, maybe that's queerness or something else. But I think not being so hierarchical about the different forms and excited about all the different possibilities, from sort of slapstick to high drama, serious, in a way, straight theatre. I think maybe that eclecticism is something tied in with queerness.
Brilliant. That's great. And I think I know Philly personally, and I think that's something that would definitely kind of speak to him. I've got a question here from Clea McAllister. In a post-COVID world, digitization or on-demand viewing seems to be an inevitable new standard. At what point does a play become a film, or what are we writing for?
Yeah, I mean, that's something. Yeah, I think that's something for everybody to wrestle with. And now that I'm starting at the King's Head, how do we use digital? I mean, I think we all had our own experiences during the lockdown, and I wrote this. Once we were locked down, I thought, well, the first thing that will come back will be audio and radio and stuff. So I wrote this audio drama. I just wrote it, and then was coincidentally invited to contribute an audio play for this Pitlochry Edinburgh Lyceum project. Said, I already have one. So yeah, I think using the best of what we got from that experience and combining that with what happens in the room live. I don't know the answer yet, but that's something that definitely going into, like, choosing work and making work as we start. Hannah and I start our first season in April. And one of the reasons why I talked to Hannah and wanted to apply for the job with her is that Hannah, for the last few years, has been working in a lot of digital video gaming and virtual reality and all sorts of things that I don't understand. And Hannah is fascinated by tech and the digital. So I'm hoping to learn from her, but we're starting off with me being the analog guy and Hannah bringing all the digital knowledge. But I think that's one of the exciting things about working with Hannah is I don't think anybody else in theatre in England has quite spent as much time in the last few years working digitally. So I'm hoping that we can lead the way in some places on a very low budget that we have with our digital work.
And you're starting, I think, with a season of queer horror, aren't you?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I think there's something about the horror genre, that allows you to explore things to do with queer identity that also speaks to quite a young, wide audience. So yes, our first season, I think Dublin will like this. Our first season from April to June is called Scared Shitless. Tales of queer fear.
Brilliant. And I can think of a few Irish writers who might be reaching out to you now, now that we've said that here as well.
There is a thing on the website for script submissions that's very specific to that slot. We haven't got the staff to do like open script submissions, but there's a brief about the queer fear season, so we'd love to hear from Irish writers if they've got something that's very specific to the brief that's on that page on the King's Head website.
Brilliant. Well, you heard it here first anyway. So I might just ask one more question here. This is in from Sam Pouch. So if we are on a constant journey of figuring out how to write a play which addresses a particular idea, how does the writer know when their play is ready for someone else to experience it or ready to give it to an audience?
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is that they're never completely ready. I mean, when you read them back in a few years' time, you do, oh no, I didn't need that, or so they're never completely finished. There is that old thing about never finished but abandoned, isn't it, for any piece of writing. But I think on the other hand, it's good to work at them until you totally have worked it through for yourself and that you inhabit and believe in the integrity of everything that's there. I think, particularly with young writers, I think that because of the sort of workshop culture and the power of literary managers and stuff, that people are quite often handing over very early drafts, and you don't need to do that. I think you have to get in touch with the bit of yourself that actually knows what's true and what's false about what you've written, and work it through. So in terms of showing it to anybody else, or maybe just one trusted friend, I wouldn't start handing out first drafts to anybody. I would have to be several drafts down the line before you show it to anybody.
Brilliant.
Would be my sense of it.
Well, thank you for that. And I just have one really short question to ask you now, which is that I saw you shared on Twitter this week that the Playwriting 101 notes might be coming to us as a podcast sometime in the near future. Is there anything you can share about that? Might be too early stages, but like
I'm working with a producer and booking a studio in London for December, and I'll talk to a number of different writers. So I think the idea is that they pick one of my 101s and we talk about that, and then they add another note. So it's like it's a bit like a 15-minute podcast with each playwright. One of my notes that resonated with them, and then they put one more in the pot of their own.
Brilliant.
That's the format. So we were hoping to start releasing them in January.
Fab. Okay, well that's great. Then that's a great note to end on, so that I think the conversation will continue in that format. And I know that we've been having chats internally here and with writers about the notes. So delighted to hear that. And thank you so much.
If anybody wants to read them all, they're archived by the Bruntwood Prize.
We posted that in the chat earlier on, actually. Brilliant. There, Mark. So everybody has access to that, but we'll make sure to share it on our social media feeds.
Thank you very much.
As well. Thank you so much for today.
It's been a real
really
honor.
Enlightening. And we are just delighted to have been here and to have heard everything that you've said. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of people very inspired after today.
Thank you.
So thanks, Mark. So we're going to have a short break now for all of the attendees. attendees, but I'm asking everybody, please be back at 11 a.m. sharp for the first panel of the day. It's called Play is Shared Finitude. It's a quote from an essay in the companion digital publication from playwright Martin Shari. The panel will be a discussion on play endings featuring renowned theatre critic Lynn Gardner, award-winning playwright Sonia Kelly, and the inaugural Seamus Heaney Professor of Irish Writing in Trinity College, Chris Morash. So it's certainly not one to miss. So we'll see you back here soon. Thank you so much.